Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Namaskar. Today we will be moving on with our next lecture in the third module on our course called Sales and Distribution Management, and in this particular lecture we shall be discussing a little bit more on sales forecasting and budgeting. In fact, this particular lecture will conclude this module on sales planning, sales forecasting and budgeting. The different topics that we will be covering in this particular lecture are: 1. The meaning of a sales budget and the rationale behind preparing sales budgets. 2. The content in a sale budget. 3. Estimating budget expenses. 4. The budgetary procedure, and 5th, the methods used for deciding the sales budget. So, let us start with the first concept, which is a sales budget. Now, a sales budget is a blueprint for making sales. We have discussed earlier that any and every organization exists to earn profits. What a company aims at is sales, it aims at large market share, it aims at increasing its presence in different market segments, and any and every business would want profits which continually see a rise. Now, in order to earn profits, the sales people and the sales team have a huge role to play. Not only do they bring in sales for the company, which will have an impact on the gross profit of the company, but they also incur selling expenses, which if controlled can have a positive effect on the net profit of the company. And if these selling expenses remain uncontrolled or are out of bounds, then it would actually dilute the net profits of a company. So, it is very, very important that a sales budget is formulated, and it provides details as to how sales are going to be incurred and with what kind of allowable expenses. A sales budget basically provides details regarding who is going to sell how much during an operating period and with what kind of allowable expenses. Now, in the first session we had spoken about how the salesperson plays a very important role in bringing sales for the company, and when we subtract the cost of goods sold from the sales, what we get is the gross profit for a company. The gross profit of a company is important, but if sales and revenue are earned at the cost of huge selling expenses, that will dilute the net profits of a company. The net profit of company equals the gross profit minus the selling expenses. So, the sales people have a huge responsibility to bring in good profits net profits for a company. How? 1, by increasing the sales of the company. 2, by reducing the selling expenses. Now, this actually necessitates the requirement for a sales budget, which is a blueprint for making profitable sales. It talks about how sales are to be earned, who is going to sell how much during a particular period, and with what kind of allowable expenses. So, it is generally, when we speak of a sales budget, we are actually talking of a statement of sales volume and the selling expenses. The sales budget is important for determining the profitability of a company, and any and every company must go through this exercise of preparing a sales budget, which will act both as an element of planning as well as control. Planning in terms of the sales volume that must be earned in a particular period, and control in terms of the expenses that can be allowable to a particular salesperson in a geographical territory or in a particular unit under study. So, this is what is the relevance of a sales budget, because it is going to act as both an element of planning as well as an element of control. Now, why do we require a sales budget? As I said, it is a tool for planning, it is a tool for control. So, sales budget helps in planning as well as in controlling expenses, planning the sales volumes and controlling the selling expenses. The sales budget ensures that there is a judicious utilization of funds. If things are not going as per plans, or if the performance of the salespeople is not as per the desired performance, the sales budget also helps identify weaknesses in the operating plans and in the strategies, and it also helps in estimating shortfalls in cash requirements of any. So, because it is an instrument of planning and it is an instrument of control, it actually helps organizations at the macro level. It helps departments and salespeople at the micro level judiciously utilize the funds. It helps keep a tab on the actual performance vis-a-vis the desired performance. It also helps identify the gaps, and if such gaps are due to controllable variations, variation factors, these can be controlled through bringing about changes in the strategies and the tactics. So, and on the other hand, if these variations in the actual and the desired are because of certain uncontrollable factors, or we would refer to them as uncontrollable variations, in this case again the top management has to sit and formulate strategies to deal with the problem. So, the variations between the desired sales volume and the actual sales volume, the gap between this may be either due to controllable factors or due to non-controllable factors. If it is due to controllable factors, we refer to as a controllable variation. On the other hand, if it is because of certain uncontrollable factors, we refer to them as uncontrolled variations. And while controllable variations can actually be dealt with by bringing about a change in the 4 Ps or strategies and tactics, the uncontrollable need to be taken care of via reformulating strategies and dealing with such situations which may not directly be in the hands of the salespeople and the sales team. Now, a sales budget again breaks down in terms of activities and expenses, and such breakdowns in the budget helps measure performance of respective units. That it is here that companies would be able to understand that what was the desired performance in a particular unit and what is the actual performance in a particular unit. So, the sales budget will clearly indicate the variations and how and why these variations have occurred, and whether they can be controlled or they are something which are not within the company's control. A sales budget also provides a basis for targeting sales volume. It also shows the ways for achieving the estimated volume. So, it not only shows the estimated target volume, but also shows the path as to how those volumes have to be achieved, and it provides a basis for preparing a very viable sales plan. Now, if we talk about the content in a sales budget, the sales budget is a statement of anticipated sales revenues and expenses, as we discussed in the previous slide as well. It displays the estimates of units expected to be sold and the revenue to be generated in a particular territory in a particular operating period, and so it provides a scope for making any kind of adjustments to achieve those targets. These adjustments may often relate to price adjustments. In a sales budget, the total sales unit are further bifurcated into unit sales, product wise, or period wise in terms of monthly, quarterly, or it could also be region wise, as we discussed in the previous session, or it could also be bifurcated with respect to different marketing channels and the channel members, be it members in the trade channel, the wholesalers, the retailers in different territories. It could be with respect to brokers, commission agents, distributors, etc. So, let us look at the figure in the next slide to make things clear. Now, this is a unit sales by sales region. There is this particular company called XYZ, and this, but if it goes in for making a sales budget which is region wise, and let's take a scenario where the company is into the electronics business, and it makes a large number of consumer goods, durables like refrigerators, microwaves or air conditioners. So in this case, we would talk about a sales budget not only in terms of the region here being north, west, south, east, okay, but it would also be in terms of product, which could be refrigerators, microwaves and air conditioners. So if you see here, this unit sales which could be spelled out in a sales budget for refrigerators in northern India could be 80 units, or it could be in central India it could be 100 units, in western India it could be 70 units, and in southern India it could be 30 units and so forth. Similarly for air conditioners, it could be now 40 for northern India or 50 for central India, 50 for western India and 80 for southern India. So in this way, the sales budget would clearly specify the total sales and as well as broken region wise for the different products, clearly speaking in terms of the unit sales. So this is how the sales budget would spell out the sales volume for a product in terms of unit sales. Unit sales could also further be spelled out quarterly or in terms of time period. So for example, if this is a western region which we are talking of, and this is a company XYZ, so for the different products, unit sales could not only could be spelled out in terms of time period. Just as in the previous slide we had the unit sales spelled out in terms of region, here we have for a particular region, let's say western India or western region, we have the unit sales spread across time period, so quarterly. So it could be January to March and April to June, it could be July to September, and then it could be October to December. So refrigerator sales for January to March, in the western region for quarter Jan to March is 70, for April to June is 100, for July to September is 70, and for October to December is 30. Similarly, you have the microwave sales, unit sales for microwaves, which in January to March quarter could be spelled out as 50, and April, May, June again would be 50, July to September could be again 50, and another quarter which is October to December could be 20. So here you have the unit sales, not only the total unit sales, okay, but the total unit sales product wise and time wise or time period wise. Again, you have another situation where you may have unit sales by the western region, or say western India, and in a particular quarter, okay, say January to March, and you do it in terms of class of accounts or the kind of customer you are dealing with, whether he is a hot prospect or a warm prospect or a cold prospect. We shall be talking about hot, warm and cold prospects in the next module, briefly speaking, hot prospects are those who have a need and a want for a product and also would be willing to enter into an exchange. They constitute a demand for your product. And warm are those who have a need or want but may or may not, and if they do so, they may not do so in the near future, either because they lack funds or because they don't have an immediate need. And the cold are those who may or may not have the need at all, but may have to be influenced into at least qualifying them as warm. So the cold here is which is least the probability of the cold being converted into a cold prospect being converted into an actual is low as compared to the hot ones. Also, if we talk about this class of accounts in terms of hot, warm and cold, hot are the ones who would give you profits, warm will give you some profits, of course, some mild, and the cold are those who may not be able to, we may not constitute to be profitable buyers at all. So in case of refrigerators, the hot could be 20 and the warm could be 100 and the cold could be 10. If we talk about unit sales, total unit sales, western region, first quarter, which is January to March, and then we also further spell it out or bifurcate it in terms of class of accounts. When we do the selling process next module, we will see that the class of accounts have to be taken care of differently. When you have hot prospects, they must actually be dealt with by the company salespeople, and warm prospects may or may not be company salespeople. You may also, depending upon the kind of product, you may also hire agents and brokers, and but or you may but in the case of cold prospects, you may often have a telemarketing team dealing with them. But in any case, whether it is hot, warm or cold, the hot would give you instant business and so are very profitable. The warm may give you, may not give you, but the cold are the ones where sales likelihood is the least and profits earned would also not be too much from this particular class of customers. So this is how you would bifurcate the unit sales by region, for example western region, again through time period, which could be first quarter or second quarter. In this case we are talking about the first quarter, and then you have the class of accounts which could be hot, warm or cold. Now, how do you estimate? So we have just spoken about the unit sales. Now, let us come to the budgeted selling expenses. Now, sales budget helps you attain a net profit for the forecasted sales volume. We have just, when we started the lecture, I discussed how the salespeople have a big responsibility of earning net profits for the company, and how by formulating proper strategies and tactics they can increase the sales of the company, and by reducing their selling expenses they can actually contribute towards building a good net profit for the company. So a sales budget helps attaining net profit for the forecasted sales volume, and it is the optimum net profit, not the maximum. We have discussed in the previous class about the difference between the sales potential and the sales forecast. So the volumes are kept in mind, sales volumes are determined and kept in mind, keeping in mind the sales forecast, and accordingly sales volumes are forecasted, selling expenses are also calculated, and then a company specifies the allowable and the non-allowable, so that it is the salespeople keep tab on their selling expenses and do not bring in sales at the cost of huge selling expenses, because if they bring in sales at the cost of huge selling expenses, then it is going to actually dilute the net profits of the company. So while companies are actually estimating the selling expenses, they take into account both immediate as well as long range plans, and a forward looking management considers budgetary expenses as investments, because the kind of expenses that salespeople incur are often those which will bear fruit in future. For example, expenses with respect to multiple sales calls, or expenses with respect to local advertising, or expenses with respect to entertaining clients, gifting them, taking them out for meals and dinners, etc. So the company here often has to understand that while it should have a control element with respect to the selling expenses, it should also keep the long range in mind and long run plans in mind while taking decisions with respect to the allowable limits for the selling expenses. So estimating budgetary expenses provides scope for making much adjustments in advance as well. If you keep a little bit of a buffer to the kind of selling expenses that can be allowed per salesperson or per unit, it also helps, because sometimes there may be a sudden rise with respect to boarding, lodging, or with respect to expenses related to travel, or with respect to calling on clients and dealing with them. So in such cases, if there is a small buffer which a salesperson can have, things would become easier for him. Now, let's talk now about budgetary procedures. A sales budgetary procedure begins at the sales department. Why? Because the sales department and the salespeople are the are the people or the who are responsible for generating inward cash flows for a company. So the sales budgetary process starts at the sales department. The selling team knows the kind of volumes it can generate. It also knows the kind of expenses that it has to incur. So because it is the sales department which generates revenues for the company, it generates inward cash flows for the company. The sales budgetary procedure begins at the sales department. The predicted cash flows undeniably affect the activities of other departments as well, and we have discussed earlier how the different departments are related to each other and how sales gets related to other departments as well as other marketing activities. The prepared budget acts as a starting point in preparing budgets for other departments as well, as it provides detailed information on the expected cash flow, because the sales team gives vital inputs into the kind of sales volume that are expected, or this particular figure or the kind of figures, they act as a basis for other departments who have to then make detailed plans based on the expected cash flow number or numeric as provided by the sales team. Now, talking about planning styles for budgetary procedures, we have discussed a little bit of this in the previous session itself, but we will go and give a brief recap on that. There are two styles for planning budgetary procedures. The budgetary procedure here again will involve both the sales volume as well as the selling expenses. Now, one is a top-down planning approach, which we often refer to as the breakdown approach, and the other is a bottom-up planning, which we call as the build-up approach. In the top-down planning, the top management will define the objectives, and these will serve as broad guidelines for preparations of budget. On the other hand, in the bottom-up approach, the authority to prepare a budget lies with those who are to implement the plans and who are to achieve targets, and the respective departments prepare their own budgets. Now, under companies which follow a very democratic pattern or a very democratic style of leadership, the views of all those affected by budgets are taken into consideration, whether it is the sales people at the ground or at the grassroots level, or whether it is the marketing channel members, the retailers, the dealers, the distributors, or whether it is the people, the branch sales managers and the people in even the zone and in the regional office. All the opinions, the suggestions from everybody is taken, and budgets are accordingly prepared. So, under democratic administration, the views of all those who are affected by budgets is taken into consideration, whether it is the salesperson or whether it is the marketing channel members, or whether it is the manager at this branch, or people working in the zone and in the region. But in the case of an authoritarian regime, or in the case of dictatorial leadership styles, or where it's a very autocratic decision making that is practiced, all decisions are taken by the top level management with minimum or very little participation of people at the middle and the lower level. So, in the case of an authoritarian nature of the top management, or where the participative style is very autocratic, it is something which is very dictatorial. In those cases, decisions are taken by the top management with very little involvement and participation of people from the middle and the lower. Of course, both have their advantages and disadvantages. In most cases, a middle path is best suited, which is a combination of both the top down and the bottom up approach, where not only the top management as well as the middle and the lower management, they all have a say, and they sit together, and the views are solicited and appreciated, and they ultimately arrive at numbers with respect to both the sales volume as well as the selling expenses. Now, what are the methods for deciding the sales budget? One could be a percentage of sales method, where the sales budget is determined by taking a percentage of the anticipated sales. Now, the anticipated sales here again, the numbers could vary, with respect to regions, with respect to products, and we will be discussing about this subsequently later when we talk about the quotas and the targets. The sales budget here is determined by taking a percentage of anticipated sales. The anticipated sales for figures or the forecast again is something which could be determined both qualitatively or quantitatively. It is something which could be based on past data, it is something which could be based on the current scenario. So also it could involve people only at the top management, or it would also involve people at the grassroots who give their inputs. The second is the executive judgment method, where the sales managers use their own judgment and experience over the years to estimate the sales budget. This is something which we discussed in the previous session as well, where people in the middle or in the higher levels as well, who use their own judgment, they use their experience over the years to prepare estimates for the sales budget. Such people could be those who have been in the selling role once upon a time, who have huge amount of experience selling products or selling in particular territories, and such people are asked for forecasts, and such estimates are then used to prepare the sales budget. Another method which can be used is the objective and task method. Here the sales volume objectives are determined, which are then broken down into certain activities and tasks which must be accomplished to achieve those objectives, and then the costs are estimated for each of the different tasks and activities, and it is summed up in the form of a budget. So this is what we mean by, this is how we would be able to decide on the sales budget with the objective and task method. Now budget of course is a tool for planning, it is also a tool for control, as we have discussed earlier. The approved budget acts as a control element, and it sets out the limits for allowable expenses. Individual items in the budget provide a basis for measuring performance. The sales figures or the estimated sales volume figures are actually the desired goals. Performance is measured product wise, territory wise, across time period, quarterly or half yearly or yearly, and the performance which is actually the actual performance is then compared against the desired performance. So while companies set their goals and targets as a desired, the actual is something which is calculated product wise, geography wise, time period wise, and finally it is seen that the gap between the desired and the actual is actually identified and has to be paid attention to. So the numbers mentioned in the budget are compared with the actuals. Deviations are identified by comparing the actuals with the desired. In most cases, desired will always be high. As we all know, it is something which is which is always seen, but as we have said earlier, this desired should be a clear number, specific number with respect to product, with respect to territorial units, with respect to the time period. It should be challenging as a goal, but it should not be unrealistic. So it has to be very a lot of care has to be taken to decide on the desired output, because this desired output is something which should be difficult and challenging, but in no way should it be unrealistic. So the actual is then compared with the desired. The deviations are identified by comparing the actual with the desired or the projected measures, and the deviations then provide for a basis for taking necessary actions. As I have just said previously, some of these reasons are well within the control of a marketing team or a sales team, and they can handle it, and these are controllable variations, but there may also be certain variations which are not within the control of the marketing or sales team or within the company. So these again have to be paid attention, and top management must formulate appropriate strategies to deal with such kind of problems. The budget is not an end in itself, it is actually a tool. It is a tool for planning, it is a tool for control. In case of unanticipated conditions, the budget need to be revised. As I just said, sometimes the variations are due to uncontrollable factors, and in those cases the top management must understand that they have to take appropriate action, and that has to be taken well within time, and so often the budget may need revision. Also, it is important that the budget is not revised very quickly or very frequently, because then it loses its power as a planning tool or as a control tool. So with this we come to an end of this particular session. The references are still Kandif, Govoni, Puri, Sales and Distribution Management, Pearson India Education Service, Havaldar and Kawale, Sales and Distribution Management, 3rd edition 2017, McGraw Hill, and Havaldar and Kawale 2007-8, Sales and Distribution Management, Tata McGraw Hill. So this brings us to an end of the 5th lecture on the 3rd module of the course. We shall be starting with the next module from the next lecture. I hope you found this lecture useful. Thank you.